In a quiet courtroom filled with tension, all eyes were on the young black teenager standing before the judge's bench. He barely spoke, his head slightly lowered, his hands tucked into the pockets of his oversized hoodie. To most people in the room, he was just another troubled kid, a silent figure in a system that had already decided his fate before he even opened his mouth. But the judge, an older man with years of experience and little patience, wasn't just indifferent. He was dismissive, even condescending. With a smirk, the judge leaned forward, tapping his gavel lightly on the desk. "What? Cat back your tongue," he sneered, glancing at the attorneys who shuffled uncomfortably beside the boy. "Figures. They never have much to say until it's too late." His tone dripped with sarcasm, as if he had seen this story play out 1,000 times before. To him, this was routine. Another kid, another case, another easy decision. The boy, still silent, didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't react at all. But in that moment, something shifted in the room. Maybe it was the way he held himself, calm and unshaken, or the way his lawyer threw him a knowing glance. Whatever it was, the judge didn't notice. He had already made up his mind about this kid. To him, this was just another day. But what he didn't know, what no one in that courtroom expected, was that this quiet teen wasn't just anyone. He was something extraordinary, and soon the judge was about to find out just how wrong he had been. Because in the next few moments, the entire courtroom would witness something that would leave even the most hardened legal professionals stunned. The judge, who had spent years assuming he could read people at a glance, was about to face a truth that would shake him to his core. And trust me, you won't see this twist coming. The courtroom was still, the air thick with unspoken judgment. The teen, who had barely moved since stepping up to the bench, finally lifted his head slightly. His dark eyes flickered with something unreadable. Was it defiance, amusement, or just patience? No one could tell, least of all the judge, who sighed loudly and leaned back in his chair. "So you're not going to speak?" The judge muttered, tapping his fingers against the wooden desk. Typical. He glanced down the file in front of him, barely skimming the words before shaking his head. "Another kid wasting everyone's time. Let's get this over with." The teen's lawyer, a young woman with sharp eyes and a steady voice, cleared her throat. "Your Honor, before you make any assumptions, I'd like to provide some important details about my client." The judge barely looked at her. "Miss, I've been doing this for years. I know exactly what kind of case this is." A quiet chuckle came from the teen. It was barely audible, but enough to make the judge pause. For the first time, he actually looked at the boy, really looked at him. Something about the way he stood, the quiet confidence he carried despite the situation, felt off. This wasn't the usual nervous shifting or fake bravado he saw from kids in trouble. This was something else. The judge narrowed his eyes. "What's so funny?" The teen finally spoke, his voice smooth and controlled. "Nothing, sir." He paused, then added, "I just think you're gonna want to read that file a little more carefully." The judge frowned, glancing back down, and as his eyes moved across the page, his expression slowly began to change. The judge's eyes scanned the file, his smirk slowly fading. At first, he thought he had misread something. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and took a closer look. His fingers gripped the edges of the paper a little tighter as his expression turned from bored amusement to quiet confusion. This wasn't the record of a troubled kid with a long history of mistakes. In fact, it wasn't what he expected at all. Instead of a list of offenses, it contained something else entirely: awards, achievements, letters of recommendation from teachers, and test scores that were nothing short of extraordinary. The boy wasn't a delinquent. He was a genius. The silence in the room stretched as the judge processed what he was looking at. He glanced up, meeting the teen's calm gaze. For the first time, he wasn't sure what to say. The lawyer folded her arms. "My client has been accepted into multiple Ivy League schools. He's won national competitions in mathematics and science. He's even worked on research projects that most adults wouldn't understand. The only reason he's standing in this courtroom is because of a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion." The judge's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. He glanced around the room as if expecting someone to explain how this was possible. He had walked into this case with an assumption, a story already written in his mind before the first word had been spoken. But now that story was crumbling. The boy tilted his head slightly. "Still think you know exactly what kind of case this is." His voice was steady, but there was a quiet edge to it. Not anger, not arrogance, just a simple challenge. The judge shifted in his seat, clearing his throat again. "Why wasn't this brought to my attention earlier?" The lawyer's eyes darkened. "Because no one bothered to ask." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The tension was shifting, twisting into something else. The judge, who had walked in feeling certain about his judgments, was now facing a truth he hadn't prepared for. And the most shocking part, the real twist, was still yet to come. The courtroom felt different now, as if the very air had thickened with the weight of unspoken words. The judge, who moments ago had been so certain of the boy's fate, was now shifting uncomfortably in his seat. His fingers tapped the desk, his jaw clenched as he tried to regain control of the moment. But he couldn't ignore what was right in front of him. The evidence, the truth, none of it fit the story he had assumed. The teen stood still, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes. Not defiance, not arrogance, just quiet certainty. He had been here before in rooms where people had already made up their minds about him before he spoke a single word. This wasn't new. But watching the judge struggle with his own bias, that was. The lawyer leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, my client was detained under circumstances that were questionable at best. A simple mix-up escalated because of assumptions, not facts." She gestured toward the file in front of him. "And now those same assumptions are keeping him in this courtroom instead of preparing for a future that most people could only dream of." The judge exhaled sharply, setting the file down. His gaze flickered between the boy and his attorney, then out toward the audience. Some people were whispering. Others were simply watching, waiting to see what he would do next. The tension in the room climbed higher. The teen hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't done anything except stand there. And yet, somehow, he had flipped the entire power dynamic without lifting a finger. Then something unexpected happened. The door at the back of the courtroom creaked open. A man in a dark suit stepped inside, his presence instantly commanding attention. He walked with purpose, his eyes scanning the room before settling on the judge. He nodded once, and in that moment, everything changed. The judge straightened, clearing his throat. There was something in his face now, a hesitation, a flicker of realization that he was no longer in control of this situation. He knew something was coming, something he hadn't planned for. And whatever it was about to change everything. The room seemed to shrink as the man in the dark suit stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the courtroom floor. His presence alone carried weight, but the way he moved, with quiet authority and absolute certainty, made it clear that he wasn't just another spectator. He belonged here. And more importantly, he had something to say. The judge shifted uncomfortably. "And you are." The man pulled out a small leather case, flipping it open just long enough for the judge to see. Whatever was inside made the judge's face pale slightly. He straightened in his seat, adjusting his robe as if suddenly feeling exposed. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder, but no one dared to speak over the heavy silence settling between the two men. The lawyer crossed her arms. "I take it you're familiar with my client's case," she asked, her voice even, though her eyes were sharp. The man nodded. "Very." He turned toward the teen, his expression unreadable. "More than you know." The judge cleared his throat. "If there's something relevant to this case, I suggest you share it now." His voice carried an edge, but it lacked the confidence it had earlier. The man glanced at the judge before returning his gaze to the teen. "I've been following your work for some time," he said. "Your research, your achievements, your ability to solve problems most people wouldn't even understand." His voice was calm, deliberate. "And I think it's time you knew the real reason you're here." A flicker of confusion crossed the teen's face. For the first time, he seemed unsure. He had expected judgment, bias, another battle to prove himself. But this was something different. The lawyer frowned. "What exactly are you implying?" The man sighed, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Let's just say, someone wanted to make sure he never got to where he was supposed to be." He glanced around the room, and they almost succeeded. The judge stiffened. "That's a serious accusation." The man didn't blink. "It's not an accusation." He turned back to the courtroom, was silent, the weight of the man's words settling over everyone like a thick fog. The team stood frozen, his mind racing. This wasn't just about a misunderstanding. It wasn't just about bias or assumptions. Someone had deliberately tried to stop him from moving forward. But why? The judge shifted in his seat, glancing between the man in the suit and the lawyer. "If you have proof, I suggest you present it now." The man nodded, reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out a stack of documents and handed them to the lawyer, who quickly flipped through them. Her expression darkened with every page. When she finally looked up, her voice was sharp. "Your Honor, this isn't just a mistake. My client was set up." A wave of gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward, his face tense. "Explain." The man in the suit took a deep breath. The charges against him, they were never real. The so-called evidence was fabricated. And the reason? He turned to the teen. "Because someone didn't want you to take the scholarship offer you received last month. Someone with a lot of power and a reason to keep you from going where you belong." The teen's stomach dropped. He had worked so hard for that scholarship, fought for it against all odds. And now he was hearing that someone had tried to take it away, not because of anything he did, but because they were afraid of what he could become. The judge frowned, his grip tightening on his gavel. And who exactly is responsible for this? The man in the suit hesitated, then slid another paper across the desk. The judge's eyes scanned it, and his face turned pale. The teen's lawyer stepped forward, her voice firm. Your Honor, the name listed here is someone from inside the legal system, someone who had access to the records, who made sure this case reached your desk, knowing exactly how you would react. The judge's jaw tensed. For the first time, he realized he hadn't just misjudged the teen. He had been played too, used as a pawn in a much bigger game. The teen exhaled slowly. He had spent his whole life proving people wrong, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. He looked up at the judge, meeting his gaze with quiet strength. So he said, his voice steady, "What happens now?" The judge didn't answer right away. He looked down at the name on the paper one more time, then slammed his gavel down. "Court is adjourned," he announced, standing abruptly. But his face was still tight with something unreadable. Anger, maybe even guilt. The courtroom erupted in noise, but the teen didn't move. His lawyer placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, whispering, "It's not over yet, but you're walking out of here today." He should have felt relieved, but instead something nagged at him. A feeling that even with the truth exposed, there was still more to this story. And as he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of the man in the suit watching him closely. Not with pity, not with sympathy, but with something else. Like he knew this wasn't the end. Like he knew the real fight was just beginning. The teen. It's a fact, and I can prove it. The room erupted into hushed whispers, tension snapping through the air like electricity. The judge, once so certain of the case before him, now found himself in the middle of something much bigger than he had ever anticipated. And the truth? It was about to change everything. The teen stepped outside the courthouse, a cool air hitting his face as he took his first deep breath of freedom. The noise from inside faded behind him, but the weight of everything that had just happened still sat heavy on his shoulders. He had come in expecting to fight against a judge's assumptions, but instead he had uncovered something much bigger, a system that had tried to erase his future before it even began. His lawyer walked beside him, her expression still tense. "You did everything right in there," she said, her voice softer now. "But this isn't over. We're going to make sure the people responsible answer for what they did." He nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The man in the suit stood a few feet away, watching him with that same unreadable expression. Finally, the man spoke. "You're smart enough to know this wasn't just about you." The teen met his gaze, his jaw tightening. "I know." The man sighed, slipping his hands into his pockets. "There are people who don't want to see you succeed. People who are afraid of what happens when someone like you gets the chance you've earned." He paused. "But you're not just smart. You're strong. And that's why they won't win." For the first time all day, the teen let himself smile. Just a little. "I never planned on letting them." The man nodded as if he had expected that answer. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the city streets. The teen exhaled, feeling the weight on his chest finally start to lift. He wasn't just free. He was ready. Ready to take back what was his. Ready to prove that no matter how many people tried to stand in his way, he would always find a way forward. And this time, nothing was going to stop him.